The FNAF franchise is made up of different forms of content with lore and mystery for the community to attempt to solve. And this week, an addition was just made to one of those forms of content, the latest book, Five Nights at Freddy's Ticket to Fun. Now this thing has a ton, and I mean a ton of lore that finally tells us more about characters, pizzerias, and even about the missing children incident, and maybe how there should have been one more child involved. So you could really make an entire video on each of these topics, but I want to focus on a small part of this book that not only connects to the old FNAF games, but it might be the key to understanding parts of the modern lore and timeline. So my name is Bronze Films, and join me as I cover how FNAF Ticket to Fun solves William Afton and how his soul has been possessing an arcade machine this entire time. But for a quick disclaimer, this video will contain spoilers for Five Nights at Freddy's Ticket to Fun, so if you'd rather wait until you check out the book for yourself, swipe away from this video and come back when you're done. Ticket to Fun was released a few days ago, and it gives us an in-universe experience from fans and employees of the animatronics, restaurants, into parts of the lore that have never been explored before. We learn things like that there was a failed MCI victim based on a letter from a fan named Timmy, who was lured into a dark closet by Bonnie for a special prize but had to leave to open his presents. Or that children have most likely seen Golden Freddy based on the hidden section of the crossword puzzle. Using a UV light, we see the message, "I saw another Freddy," with a hidden word reading, "Golden." And we also got confirmation to a popular theory that I'm going to relate to William Afton, arcade theory. Gibby Horror Homestead is someone who needs no introduction. I'm sure many of you have seen this almost 9-hour long video or some of their theories in FNAF discussion videos. And you probably also heard of arcade theory, a theory saying that the arcade machines in the FNAF games are haunted or possessed the exact same way the animatronics are. The ghosts are connected to the machines and the human characters in the FNAF world can actually play them. So for example, the reason at the end of FNAF 6 we have images from the minigames is because these are real in-universe diegetic games that the characters could see. You can watch this amazing video to get the full context, so of course all credit to this theory goes to Gibby. So when looking at Ticket to Fun, we first get this paragraph titled, "All work, no play," and it reads, "If any of the game cabinets turn on during the course of the night, please immediately shut them down to conserve power. If the game does not shut down even if unplugged, immediately return to your post. Ignore any messages that may appear on the screens. This is a known glitch with no current fix. Employees found playing arcade games while on the clock will be immediately terminated either by us or by the animatronics they didn't hear coming." I mean, arcade machines turning on even after being unplugged and displaying messages just screams possessed, and messages could include "it's me" or even "save them." It doesn't really get clearer than arcades staying on, but for more evidence we have this image of Charlie from the security puppet minigame. The only way Fazbear's Entertainment would be able to obtain this image of 8-bit Charlie is if the minigame actually existed in the context of the story. Now it's up to debate if this is telling us that Charlie is possessing an arcade machine or that this is some sort of remnant manifestation, which could be why it's only visible under the UV light. We also get images of cars from Midnight Motorist that can also only be seen under UV, possibly meaning that the Midnight Motorist arcade machine is possessed and that the characters from FNAF have played this minigame. It's even mentioned as one of Timmy's favorite arcade machines in the paragraph I mentioned earlier. So these few short images and paragraphs tell us that the idea of souls possessing arcade machines is possible, which is exactly what I think is happening later in the FNAF timeline. I think that William's soul is possessing this Balloon Boy arcade machine, either voluntary or involuntary, which then allowed him to return as Burntrap. Now I know that sounds a bit random, so going down the list of evidence, during PAX West 2024 and outside of the Secret of the Mimic demo, fans could play an arcade version of FNAF Ultimate Custom Night, with Dako even recreating his infamous 50-20 mode celebration. Now sure, this could just be something Stu will put out for fans to enjoy while waiting in line, but it could also easily include lore to chew on. Where UCN takes place has always been up for discussion, whether that be a purgatory, a nightmare, or even in a different dimension. But what if this was a way to tell us that William's soul was trapped inside of an arcade machine by the vengeful spirit? Meaning someone else inside the FNAF world could have found this arcade machine and found a way to get William out of the game. Shout out to this comment who reminded me the arcade machine was at the demo, so I think it makes the most sense that Vanessa was the one who found this machine. Which brings us to the modern lore of the timeline. Down in the sinkhole and in the FNAF 6 room where Burntrap is, we find evidence of Vanny living down there while Burntrap, you could say, was still cooking. We find the Vanny logo spray painted on the wall, a bed, blankets, newspapers, and food, all scattered around this area. We even find tally marks for probably each day she stayed down there in the sinkhole. Most importantly, we also find this Balloon World arcade machine with the screen glitching in and out. This is where I think William was being held captive. This is the arcade machine that I think William's soul is possessing. When playing the arcade machine, you play as Balloon Boy, trying to avoid different obstacles between a night and day setting. Occasionally, a small purple glitch effect will appear on screen. If the player reaches it quick enough, the minigame will have a glitch purple look to it. and if you follow the outline of the glitch terrain, you can continue the minigame until you reach the very end, an enlarged eclipse behind Balloon Boy with the message, "Good night." Now this minigame also screams possessed to me, or that something supernatural is happening here. This small purple glitch effect could even be a glimpse to William's soul itself, and that the entire screen going purple is how William's soul is possessing this arcade machine. The same way something would go wrong with other minigames like in Security Puppet where Charlie's locked outside, and this has already basically been proven to be possession. The carnival setting of the arcade could also be a reference to Fall Fest, which at this point is an infamous event in the FNAF franchise that has finally been expanded on in Secret of the Mimic. This new game suggested that the Fall Fest fire, which most likely took place between the year 1970 to 1979, was responsible for the death of Fiona Murray, wife of Edwin Murray, who both owned Murray's Costume Manor, a contracting business for Fazbear's Entertainment. This side of FNAF has its own insane lore that I'm sure you've seen be discussed by now, but the Fall Fest fire that has been teased since the very first Help Wanted game was probably caused by William Afton. You can watch this video to see why I think that's the case, so the dark forest and eclipse being here could be a way to represent the fire, or I could be reaching at nothing. But this arcade machine is a good way to explain where William was in the context of the story that allowed him to return. However you want to look at it, if William was trapped inside this arcade by the vengeful spear, or if he found a way to preserve his life with this arcade game, this can tell us where William's soul was between FNAF 6 to Security Breach. The arcade machine even being there was always an odd detail to me. Vanny doesn't strike me as someone who would play arcade machines on our downtime while something like this is happening, so now we can say it was for a much greater reason. Another interesting detail is that we can find the exact same Balloon World arcade machine in the daycare center secret room. Now who was in this room is also up for debate, with some saying it was Gregory, Cassie, or even the Mimic. But whoever this is, maybe the Balloon World arcade machines act very similar to the Princess Quest arcades, where it's almost like a hive mind that was shared between the arcades, as you had to beat every single one to stop the glitch trap virus. So maybe whoever was in this room had this specific arcade here because they wanted to either stop or free William's soul from this arcade. And maybe that's the reason we see the exact same arcade in these two areas. Vanny would find a way to extract his essence or soul and would throw it into the Burntrap endoskeleton or into the new corpse we see wrapped around the suit. That's why in an almost Frankenstein moment, we see Burntrap emerge from the charging station as William is given a new life. This could also explain why Vanny was in the sinkhole for so long. All of the tally marks are a day of experimenting and trying to get William out of the arcade machine and into a new corpse. We could even take this a step further and relate it to what Cawthon said about Burntrap and Security Breach.
And I can give you a really easy example for this. And I'm hesitant to say this because I don't like messing with the lore, but I think in this case it's okay. When it comes to Burntrap, originally Burntrap was never supposed to move. He was supposed to just be something you saw in the corners, or like if you were walking past machinery, you might be able to peek in between two things and see him in the corner or propped up against a wall, almost like a some kind of decaying movie prop, and you never fully understood what his purpose was. And he had a very specific purpose, and I'm not going to say what that purpose was, but realistically he never moved. Well, obviously that's not what we got in Security Breach. In Security Breach we got a capsule opening and purple smoke flowing out and him climbing out and coming to get you. And so it's just not quite the same thing. So, but anyway,
I've already made a whole video on what Cawthon said about Burntrap, but I also think we could relate it to arcade theory. Similar to how images of Charlie would manifest into the Ticket to Fun pages, what if this is a manifestation of William's soul? The reason he doesn't move is because he's not actually there, acting like a decaying movie prop. Maybe Cawthon gave Stewart the idea of William being trapped inside of an arcade machine, but Stewart took it in a different way that Scott had visioned. However, now I'm just throwing some ideas out there. But addressing the elephant in the room, this can't be a video on the modern FNAF lore if it doesn't mention the Mimic, the franchise's latest antagonist that we finally got a backstory to in Secret of the Mimic. Which is why it's still being debated if the Mimic was planned since the very start and that the lore was supposed to move on from the Afton family. It can even be argued that Burntrap is actually the Mimic, and it's a possibility I went over in one of my latest theories. When working on this theory, it was mainly under the assumption that William was meant to come back and that he is Burntrap, but by no means is any of this confirmed. Especially when there's plenty of evidence saying that the Mimic is Burntrap and even Glitchtrap, which is why I want to emphasize this video is just a theory. Although Ticket to Fun did honestly confirm arcade theory in my opinion, it doesn't automatically mean William is in the arcade machine. Especially since, if anything, you could argue that the Glitchtrap virus is instead William and that he would be inside of the Princess Quest arcade machines. Although I personally believe that the Mimic is the Glitchtrap virus and the Mimic and William Afton were both around at the same time just in different ways, it could go either way and nothing is really confirmed. But with this latest FNAF book saying that it is possible for souls to possess arcade machines, I am simply throwing out the idea that this is what happened with William in the modern FNAF lore. I I definitely think this book is trying to tell us about Midnight Motorist and that there's more happening with this minigame. But that's a topic for another video, and I'm excited to see people tackle this minigame once again. But what do you guys think? Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories. So thank you guys so much for watching, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel.